How do I check a statement before the annual review?
A fortnight before the review, the school should provide everybody who's involved in the review with their up-to-date school report and any others that they've had, say, from a speech and language therapist or teacher of the deaf. You can't amend a statement without evidence. You can't just put in what you'd like to see in there. You've got to have evidence to back it up, and that is in the Code of Practice. So, but assuming for the moment that you can find the evidence that you want in your reports, what I would do then is get the authority to give you an electronic copy of the statement. Most people probably get that anyway these days, I would guess. But obviously it's easier to amend electronically for most people. And then I would go through the statement and use strike through to cross out the bits that I don't want, and use bold to put in the bits that I want to take from the reports. And just to show that I'm not making it up, I would put in brackets, see Educational Psychology Report 2011, page 6, bullet point 4 if you want to be really precise. If you do that, if you put a reference to each of the amendments that you're requesting, it's actually very difficult for the authority to refuse, because you've backed it up with evidence from a professional. What I would do then, if I were you, when I get your statement, or if you're going to an annual review ready to amend the statement, I would go through and do a quick analysis, maybe not word by word. I'd go through and identify what the areas are that you're going to want either to discuss or to have changed, or both. But once you've got those ideas jotted down on there, you can then go through each bit of the statement and look to see how you would like it changed. So it might just be that it's a really out-of-date description. So you might just want to get things like that changed. But more importantly, you've got things that are out of date in terms of what they actually can do in terms of their learning, or the provision that's needed. Or they might have developed a new need. Quite often children get a new diagnosis at some point in their school career. They might have a new diagnosis of dyspraxia, autism, social communication, a whole range of things. Or it might be that the provision for their deafness in terms of medical provision has changed. They might have had another implant since the statement was written. Anything like that is going to have an impact on what then goes into the provision.
What should I look for when checking a statement? Make sure that any terminology used is meaningful.
Needs is the word you want to see in a statement, not would benefit from. You see lots of things like would benefit from, and most children, to be honest, even if they don't have a difficulty, would benefit from an hour with even a teacher of the deaf, because an hour of one-to-one time, whether you're deaf or not, is lovely. Extra individual attention is great. So would benefit from is fairly meaningless. You need to see the word needs.
Check that the language used regarding support is specific and quantified, like these examples.
At least, already that's really encouraging that you've got that phrase, at least. So you can hold somebody to a minimum there. At least weekly direct therapy. We know it's got to be direct. In other words, it's not just a programme that will be delivered by a learning support assistant or whatever. So at least is good, weekly is good, direct is good. At least weekly direct therapy. From a speech and language therapist, okay, that's what you'd expect, but now we're going to know what type of speech and language therapist. So one who is experienced at working with deaf children. And they've added here, and worked on across the whole curriculum on a daily basis. And that's what I was talking about in the first session this morning, that therapy doesn't just stop with the therapist session, it goes on right the way through the curriculum if it's going to work effectively.
What happens after I've checked the statement?
So looking back then at what you've got your reports and you've underlined, you've highlighted the bits that you want, you then send off those amendments to the local authority, clearly cross-referenced to the reports that you're going to give them if they haven't already got copies. And probably no bad thing just to include them anyway with the highlights. When you send that off then to the local authority, they've got to, if it's an annual review, there are no time limits, funnily enough. It's one of the few things in the statute, in the Code of Practice, which doesn't have a time limit. So they've got some time, shall we say, to make a decision. Once they've made the decision, they've got a week in which to communicate that to you. But to be sensible, I think if you don't get a response from them in a few weeks, it's worth just ringing them up to say, could you tell me when I'm likely to get a response, and remind them that way. So send off the request for amendments and see what comes back. It's still not the end of the road, even if they say no. to some of the amendments, but there may be room for further negotiation. If it gets to a stage where they've agreed everything they're going to agree, but there are still things in there that you're requesting and they can't or won't agree to, then you could just say to them, if you're thinking along the tribunal route, please just finalise the statement with those details in there, and we'll take it to tribunal. Because you can't go to tribunal until you've got the final statement.